Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us. At Twilio, Signal is our favorite time of year. Thank you so much for coming, for being here with us, for sharing obviously what all of you have built. And I don't know if you know, Twilio is a very customer-centric company. We build together with the community. We build together with developers. Autopilot is a product that we've built with hundreds of you, and a lot of you guys are here. It's a product that we built with a series of hackathons over this last year, just kind of seeing what developers needed and iterated on the product until today. So I want to share a little bit on I'll talk about the product, the features, and everything, but I also want to share a little bit about the philosophy with what we started with. And prior to working on Autopilot, I used to lead programmable voice. I led programmable voice for the last 4 years. And one of the things that we always saw was kind of this trade-off between customer experience and operational efficiency. It's ingrained, like deeply rooted. You have a knob there that you can choose how long do you want people to wait on hold and how many agents to staff. And like customer service, customer experience, people know that this trade-off is there. And like we started by challenging, when we started working on machine learning at Twilio, we started by challenging this, is this something that we're gonna have to live with the rest of our lives? And can we have a better experience and better operational efficiency? And obviously this is a multi-year, multi-decade endeavor, but that's the underlying motivation of pretty much everything that we do. So, and when you look at the world of bots and virtual assistants, perhaps the biggest problem of it all is mismatched expectations. It's mismatched expectations internally within companies of like what a bot or a virtual assistant can do, and also mismatched expectations with the user. Then obviously programming them is not easy. It has a bunch of machine learning stuff. Doing the dialogue management is not easy. And then they're very channel specific. So when we built Autopilot with these three things in mind, the most important one is perhaps how do we manage the expectations? And it's super important for all of you thinking about deploying virtual assistants, how you set the tone, the expectations with customers internally of what you can and cannot do. If you take something like this, I lost my wire transfer to Botswana. In April, I went on a safari, made a wire transfer to pay for the safari, and that wire transfer was like nowhere to be found. It is rocket science to find it. Like you cannot do that in the website. You can't do it in any self-service channel. A frontline agent won't do it. A supervisor won't do it. You need to make it all the way to the international FX desk to find it. So that's really an interaction that's well suited for humans. Or if you say, I'd like to buy life insurance, that's more of a hybrid interaction where you want to collect a bunch of data up front. There's like it's a very well-defined workflow. You need name, age, whether you smoke or not, income level, state where you live, bunch of stuff. And then the second part of that interaction is a much more kind of consultative sell where like a rep talks about like your life goals and like a bunch of stuff. So that's kind of very different. Or the booking appointment example, it's prime candidate for self-service. But the challenge is that part of the problem is that it's not that easy to know which one is which, right? You have this broad spectrum of different customer issues. And you get into trouble when you send the appointment person to an agent, then like you're kind of you're not making the best use of your resources. And customers actually prefer self-service when possible. If you send the Botswana guy to self-service, that person is going to break through whatever bot, whatever IVR, that person is going to find their money no matter what. And that experience is not going to end well. So really kind of finding the right tool for the job is kind of task number one. So effectively classifying customer issues is perhaps one of the most important things. But then we also heard, which once I know what type of issue and once I know what it is, how do I build those sophisticated self-service workflows that have great customer experience? And then how do I bridge the self-service world with the human world? So that's kind of in a nutshell why we built Autopilot, to help serve customers at scale. So there's three parts to Autopilot. It's a natural language understanding engine, it's a conversational application platform, and it's an omnichannel hub. Let's take a look at the first building block. First building block takes all of that. It's a natural language router that takes you to the right type of task. Now, I don't know if you know, but give or take, on average, a big consumer company has roughly 150 reasons why customers contact them. So this is not a matter, like 150 things don't fit on a screen, they don't fit on an IVR menu. It's not a matter of like 1 to 10 options, right? I'm going to talk a little bit about the natural language routing and how we do it with Autopilot. So when you think about machine learning, there's kind of three parts to machine learning. One, the modeling and the parameter tuning, deploying those machine learning pipelines in high availability infrastructure, and the training. So what we've done is we've built Autopilot, the natural language router, with models that are fine-tuned for real-time communications, that are fine-tuned for these type of interactions, that are fine-tuned for whatever comes out of the speech engine. They're fine-tuned for how people chat. So it's not expecting proper English. We've deployed, obviously, Twilio, everything we do is done in a high availability infrastructure, but we've also baked things into the product where you can manage it in a high availability infrastructure. We have things like model versioning and rollback. If something goes wrong, you can revert back to the other model. And it comes with 21 built-in data types. So you just saw name, date, and time. We have a bunch of others, so you can get started faster. But obviously, every business is unique, and we give you the tools to train your own model. So what we're going to do is that we're going to train, first thing we're going to do is that we're going to train the natural language router for Deep Table, our imaginary restaurant that is, we're going to make it into the world's smartest restaurant. Okay, so what you should all see if you go to the Twilio console, you should now see Autopilot. Autopilot is in public beta, publicly accessible. Everyone can play around with it. And we're gonna create an assistant from scratch. So what you'll notice is that we have a hello world task, and we have our router. The hello world task doesn't do all that much. And we're going to go here to channels, go to voice, and we're going to copy paste this URL, and we're going to paste it into this toll-free number. Let's see if this works.
This is your new task.
Can you guys hear? Closer.
This is your new task.
So, easy enough. I can also hold it too. So what we'll do is we'll say, welcome to Deep Table, the world's smartest restaurant. Deep Table's virtual assistant. I can help you make reservations or telling you about today's special. What would you like to do? So notice a couple of things which are always good practice in conversational UX. Introduce as an assistant. So you set the expectations with the user. Number two, you give a hint on what the virtual assistant can actually do. When we say, hey, welcome to Deep Table, how can I help you? It's kind of the entire universe. So if you say, hey, I can help you with these two things, it sets expectations with the user. Okay, we can do these, make reservations or get today's special. Go ahead and save. You'll also notice the difference here. We can set an HTTP URL if I want, when this task is invoked, if I want to serve the actions from my web application, you can do that, or you can use the actions bin that's a static hosting for actions. So the other thing you'll notice here is the defaults. So the defaults, there's three defaults. One is the assistant initiation. This is, for example, in the case of a phone call, when the assistant says something first, what is that task? In messaging, for example, normally the user texts in first, the assistant responds, so there's no initiation. Fallback is if no task was identified, and on failure, on the collect, is if you time out that data collection, where does it go? So for now, we'll just leave everything to our hello world task. And we'll go ahead and create two that are get today's special. And make a reservation. So you'll see these don't show up with samples. And when I call it, still saying this is, we can call it and see our new message. See if this works better.
Welcome to Deep Table, the world's smartest restaurant. I'm Deep Table's virtual assistant. I can help you make reservations or telling you about today's special. What would you like to do?
Okay, so that message is working, but that's it. What I need to tell the assistant is, after that prompt, that it needs to listen for user input. So I'm going to put listen equals true. But then kind of how the natural language router works. How do we get to these two tasks that we were created? So let's go to the natural language router and see. And what we have here is the samples interface, where you give it samples of how a certain task is expressed in natural language. So we're going to give it, I've got some pre-baked samples, and you can see it's not a ton. We'll do our multi-line. So something like make a reservation, I want to book a table, like all variations of that, right? You really need at least 10 samples when you're playing around with it, so the machine learning kicks in. It's not doing keyword matching, it's not doing anything like that. This is building a machine learning model, so it needs data, so it starts working. And then here we choose the task. This mapping obviously is crucial of putting the right samples to the right task. Okay, there we go. And now we're going to this and create the samples for get to special. Cool. So we'll say I can help you make a reservation. We'll go ahead and save this. And then let's imagine that today's special is dog confit with roasted Brussels sprouts. Last part, let me go to the router. Like with any machine learning, you need to build a model. So building the model takes all those samples, takes all the definition that we just did, and creates a machine learning model we're going to call V1. That's kind of the brain of your assistant. You'll see models take some time to build. 3 seconds. The larger the data set, the longer it takes to build. So once you grow and scale, it'll take a little bit more, but that's normal. These very small ones are pretty much done immediately. So I think, and here you have a test call widget that you can use, call directly into your assistant. We're just going to stay on the phone for now for the mics. I think we're all set. What we're going to do, yeah, that makes sense.
Welcome to Deep Table, the world's smartest restaurant. I'm Deep Table's virtual assistant. I can help you make reservations or telling you about today's special.
That's too low. Yeah, let's get some volume on this one.
Welcome to Deep Table, the world's smartest restaurant. I'm Deep Table's virtual assistant. I can help you make reservations or telling you about today's special.
Can you guys hear at all? Not. Yeah? Okay, we'll keep doing this.
Welcome to Deep Table.
Not
the
yet.
world's smartest restaurant. I can help you make a reservation.
Right. Let's see.
Welcome to Deep Table, the world's smartest
Get today's special.
Today's special is duck confit with roasted Brussels sprouts.
We are downtown San Francisco, so. So you can see how, like in a couple of minutes with 10 samples, I can route the call basically to a task. I can do this with messaging as well. If you guys want to follow along, I'm just going to wire up messaging, and we'll put it on the same phone number. So if you want this phone number, This is getting complicated. This phone number. If you want to follow along, text that phone number, text it anything, or text it, get today's special, and you'll see autopilot working on messaging as well. So somehow with kind of the natural language router, kind of step one, sometimes you want to build like a one-task assistant, which is perfectly fine. You don't need the router then. If you're building, for example, a survey, whether it's a messaging or a voice survey, where you just go in and boom, 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 ask a bunch of questions, that's a one task. You don't need training for that. But if you're doing a multitask assistant, then you need to train the router to get the user to the right place. But then once you're in the right place, kind of building those sophisticated self-service workflows, when we started working on this, so it's like, what does it take? We figured out it takes 4 things to build a great self-service workflow. You need the natural language understanding. But perhaps this part, I think it's so often overlooked. It's the dialogue state management. When you're in a conversational interface, kind of where the user is in the whole interaction is extremely important. And what can the user do at different points, and like what are the different flows, that's really important. But then how you integrate that to your business logic is crucial, right? And obviously doing all the channel integrations. And like if you look like what are your options out there, like an NLU service does NLU, but then you're left on your own. Software as a service bot does a bunch, kind of falls short on customization, it's channel specific. What we wanted to do is build the platform that has all these 3 components, but obviously focused on developers. We believe in programmability over customization. So you should just be able to write code and get it to do whatever you want. So big concept number 1, tasks. Tasks are kind of like the fundamental building block of autopilot. Tasks, simple, it's like what you want your assistant to do. So in the restaurant example, today's special, make reservation, confirm, cancel. Whatever the implementation of that task is, where you pull data from a database, where you hit a reservation system, but it's essentially you get the assistant to do something. Second important concept of actions. So once you're in a task, you program with a say, a show, remember, a collect, or a redirect. So for this example, I just use a say. We had a visual device. You can do a show, so show an image, show a carousel of images. Remember lets you build that context. So if you already said, sure, I'll have the special, you can put that in the memory and go from there. And collect, you can build those conversational forms as easy as you can build a web form. So if you're familiar with Twilio, how many people are familiar with Twiml? Okay. How many people are not familiar with Twiml? Okay. So Autopilot has a very similar request response model, or the same request response model as Twiml, where essentially when a task gets invoked, we webhook out and fetch actions. But what it's different is that the actions are defined in JSON, not in XML. But the actions are also more declarative. So you kind of tell it, the assistant, hey, here's what I want. You go and do it. For example, collect, ask these 3 questions and handle all the rest for me. Channels, voice, SMS, chat, all the messaging channels, and some of these you'll see come online. Alexa, you can play around with it. We will continue to expand our channel offering as we move on, but play around with them, kick the tires. This is perhaps my one of my favorite parts of Autopilot is how you can just build once and deploy everywhere. So say works in voice, works in SMS, pretty straightforward. Show, you can tell it to display an image. Remember essentially keeps key value pairs, and that way you can build context. You will get the remember as a remember stores all the data in what we call the assistant memory. That's kind of what's building the context, and you will get the entire payload of the memory on every webhook. So you can do stuff with it on your app, in your app. And then we have handoff. So what you saw today was a handoff to task router. That is, so you do the same thing, URI, task router, : the workflow SID. Here, this is a handoff to just a traditional voice URL. You get a webhook there, you return TWIML, you can do whatever you want with the call. Handoff will expand it. Today works in voice. We will expand it over time to work in all the other modalities. So three things I want to say about Collect, if it's not super obvious for developers in the room. Collect does all the dialogue state management. So you don't need to keep track, oh, this person is in question 3, had 1 failed attempt. We need to keep track of nothing. So you just give it the questions, give it the max number of retries, and give it an on failure on what to do. All the error case handling is managed for you, and all the NLU models. So let's move on here. Style sheets. The style sheets is a really cool concept that Autopilot has, where we're decoupling completely the business logic from the style. So if you look, this is a real style sheet. There is nothing that you can change in that style sheet that will break the business logic. There's nothing. It doesn't change. You cannot change the flow of a conversation with the style sheet. And that was a really important part for us, building the style sheets of what's the style and kind of the tone and voice versus actual flow of a conversation. And so the error messages, for example, are, if you don't like the ones we have, you can create your own style sheet. If you need a specific error message for a specific question, you can always override the style sheet when you write the collect. So you have all the flexibility here. But I encourage you to play around with it. This is really what gives kind of that last part of the experience and edge. So lastly, what I'll say here, similar to what I just said on the keynote, there is always a scenario for handoff. If you go back to where we started with the 3 types of tasks, whether you have a task that should be handled by a human because it's the lost wire transfer case to Botswana, whether it's a task that is a hybrid task, which is partly automated, partly human, like the life insurance, or a well-defined workflow that is self-service. Here, you just first need to know what type of thing it is. If it's a lost wire transfer or a rental car crash, you need to classify it and route. Here, the transition is done by design, right? So it's intended. And here, in self-service, you escalate on failure. So if somebody's having trouble, consumers prefer self-service until it fails. Then the tolerance goes down dramatically. Then they want to talk to somebody immediately, right? And if you think about it, think about how you manage your agents, if you have somebody going down the flow, say purchasing a really expensive life insurance, and they get stuck on the second to last step, you want to help them immediately. You don't want to send them to, hey, go check our website or go check our FAQ. You want to get somebody on the line, where it's chat, whether it's a phone, immediately. So Handoff passes all the context. And for TaskRouter, those of you who are familiar with TaskRouter, we actually pass the entire dialog payload, that is all the context of what was collected during autopilot. We pass it as a task attribute. So you can even make routing decisions based on that context that's collected with autopilot. And then you saw the Flex integration. So Handoff, the last action, and that's what I had to share with you all today. Enjoy Signal, hack on autopilot. Let me know if you have any questions. I'll be around both days. Thank you very much.